really carefully, or you will be in the right church but the wrong pew. Are you okay on that? Okay. All right, next page, bilateral procedures. I believe it was last week that we talked about when you have the same diagnosis occurring on bilateral sides of the body, you only code it one time. It's different when you're talking about procedures. When you have bilateral procedures, we've got one done on one side, one done on the other, then you do assign the code twice, because that's the only way you have of showing that you did something times two. So a diagnosis that appears only once, or that appears multiple times in the body, you code only one time. But if a procedure, you code twice. Now, it's highly unlikely that anybody would ever do this. But let's say that I am in the hospital for aseptic necrosis of both femurs, the necks of both femurs. And they're going to do a total hip replacement of both legs. They're not going to do that at the same time. Trust me, they're just not going to. But for the sake of an example, if for some chance they did, how many times would you put down the code for aseptic necrosis? Once. How many times would you put down the code for total hip replacement?
For procedure, twice.
Twice. Because that tells you that you did it 2 times. Would you expect that the care of that patient and the cost of that surgery would be greater for having done it twice than once?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And without the code, you have no way of showing that it was done twice. Coding approaches and closures. Well, let's make sure everybody understands what an approach is and what a closure is. My gallbladder needs to come out, okay? They can either do it by an open procedure or they can do it laparoscopically. What is an open procedure? They cut you open. You got a 5 or 6 inch incision. You're in the hospital multiple days. You go home and you hurt. You possibly have some problems. Or they can do it by the laparoscopic technique. What's involved in the laparoscopic technique? A couple of little holes. Maybe I've had one done. I was either 5 or 6 holes. Now I'm getting my surgeries mixed up. But I think it's about 5 or 6 little holes, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch long. You have it done that day in day surgery. You go home that afternoon. Which one is better for the patient?
The laser one.
The laparoscopy. Not laser, laparoscopy. Okay, total different thing. Laparoscope means that they can actually put a device into your abdomen and they are visualizing through that device. They have other entry portal holes that they go in with the actual devices for the cutting and the snipping and the removing. So that's why they have so many holes. One is to blow you up so they carbon dioxide so they can see everything. Another one is to put the scope in so they can visualize it. The other is to put the instrument in. And they're just literally taking this, they're looking through the laparoscope and they're doing the device while the device is inside your body. Yeah, it's really amazing stuff. Now, of course, they've taken that even one step farther and gone to robotics. But do you remember, see if you're all old enough, do you remember it wasn't an Etch-a-Sketch, I don't remember the name of it, but you had this plastic device and it had all these angles to it, and you would there'd be 2 pins on it. And one pin would be on this piece of paper and the other pin would be where you are, and you could trace the picture that you wanted to make larger, and because it was connected by all of these pieces of plastic, it would draw the big one at the same time. I'm really dating myself. I don't remember what it was called. It was a way that I could trace something, and because it was connected to bigger angled things, and it had a pin on it, it would actually draw the same thing, but it would draw bigger. That's what robotic surgery is. I'm doing the stuff out here, but it's doing it to the patient on the inside. That's kind of like the laparoscope in the same technique. All right. An approach is the way you enter the body to do something. So you have an open approach, which means you open the patient up with a great big old incision, or you perhaps do a laparoscopic approach. The operative approach is generally considered to be a part of the procedure itself, and you do not code the approach. Because if I'm doing a cholecystectomy, an open cholecystectomy, could I do an open cholecystectomy without making an incision into the patient? No. So would I code incision into abdomen? No. Because I can't do the open cholecystectomy without having made the incision. So one's inherent in the other. Okay? If I'm going to do a removal of a brain tumor, have I got to do some sort of a craniotomy in order to get to where the brain tumor is if I'm going to do it through surgery? Yeah. Got to get the bone out before I can get into the brain. So that's the approach. All right. Now, if the approach is considered to be an integral part of the procedure, and therefore you do not code it separately. All right. The operative approach is coded when an opening into the body cavity is followed only by a diagnostic procedure such as a biopsy. I'm on the second paragraph. An example, you're going to do an exploratory laparotomy for the purpose of removing an abdominal mass. When the body cavity is open, it's clear that a malignant lesion has spread throughout the abdominal cavity to an extent that a therapeutic resection is inappropriate. The surgeon removes samples of tissue to confirm the diagnosis and closes the abdominal incision. In this case, we do code the laparotomy with an additional code for the biopsy, because the exploratory lap is really more of a significant procedure than a biopsy and should be coded first. Now let's talk our way through that one a little bit. If I'm going to do a laparotomy with the removal of the uterus, what is a laparotomy? Laparo means abdomen. Otomy means to make an incision into. All right, so a laparotomy is when you open up somebody's belly. And we're going to do it to remove the uterus because we're going to do a hysterectomy. If we're going to do an open hysterectomy, must you automatically do a laparotomy in order to get access to the uterus? Yeah. Can't take it out the front if you don't open it up. Would I code the laparotomy in that case? No, because it's inherent in it. Can't do the hysterectomy without doing the laparotomy. All right, but when I got ready, when I opened the patient up, I saw that there was so much malignancy that there was no need for me to try to take out the uterus. So I didn't do that. I didn't do the hysterectomy. I did the laparotomy, but then once I got in there, I decided that I would do a biopsy so I'd know what kind of tissue it was. Now do I code the laparotomy?
Yes.
And do I code the biopsy?
Yes.
Yes, I do. And which one is principal?
Biopsy.
The laparotomy is principal because it's typically considered a much more definitive, detailed procedure. All right.